The strike force of the combined fleet cruised through the Pacific Ocean, counting down the days to the beginning of the Pacific War. As planes took off from the decks of their carriers, their destination was in the tropical paradise of Hawaii. The attack on Pearl Harbor would shift World War II, but not in the direction the Japanese had hoped. Welcome to Fast Facts Friday. My name is Eleanor. Just a quick disclaimer for our younger audience before we dive in. This story may be disturbing to some, so viewer discretion is advised. Okay everyone, let's get into it. The combined fleet, for those unaware, was the main sea-going component of the Imperial Japanese Navy. Until 1933, the combined fleet was not a permanent organization, but a temporary force formed for the duration of a conflict or major naval maneuvers from various units normally under separate commands in peacetime. After 1933 until the end of World War II, it was a permanent setup of its own. During the First Sino-Japanese War, the combined fleet was formally created for the first time on July 18, 1894 by the merger of the Standing Fleet and the Western Fleet, hence the name Combined Fleet. The Standing Fleet, also called the Readiness Fleet, contained the Navy's most modern and combat-capable warships. The Western Fleet was a reserve force consisting primarily of obsolete ships deemed unsuitable for frontline combat operations, but still usable for commerce protection and coastal defense. Vice Admiral Ito Sukeyuki was appointed the first commander-in-chief of the combined fleet for the duration of the First Sino-Japanese War against China. The Chinese would lose in the First Sino-Japanese War in 1895, shifting regional dominance in East Asia from China to Japan for the very first time. Within China, the loss of Korea as a tributary state and the defeat was a catalyst for a series of political upheavals led by Sun Yat-sen and Kang Youwei, culminating in the 1911 revolution and ultimately ending dynastic rule in China, with the Qing dynasty being the final dynasty that ruled in China. The combined fleet was reformed once more during the Russo-Japanese War of 1904 to 1905 to provide a unified overall command for the three separate fleets in the Imperial Japanese Navy. The first fleet was the main battleship force, which formed the backbone of the Navy and was intended to be used in a traditional line of battle showdown with an equivalent enemy battleship fleet, and this idea is known as the decisive battleship doctrine, or Kantai Keisen. The second fleet was a fast, mobile strike force with armored cruisers and protected cruisers. The third fleet was primarily a reserve fleet of obsolete vessels considered too weak for frontline combat service, but which could still be used in the operation to blockade Port Arthur. For the duration of the Russo-Japanese War, Admiral Togo Haihachiro was commander-in-chief of the combined fleet. From what I can tell, the combined fleet didn't form often for World War I. Not that Japan didn't participate, but just that it was primarily with separate fleets. It was not a permanent organization like we mentioned earlier, so between 1905 and 1924, it was created sporadically and as needed during fleet maneuvers or when called for by extraordinary circumstances, and immediately disbanded afterward. After World War I, the Imperial Japanese would sign the Washington Naval Treaty, which limited the size of the Navy to a ratio of 5:5:3 between the capital ships of the UK, US, and Japan. The treaty also banned Japan from building any new capital ships until 1931, with no capital ship permitted to exceed 35,000 long tons. Provided new additions didn't exceed 3,000 long tons, existing capital ships were allowed to be upgraded with improved anti-torpedo bulges and deck armor. By the time the treaty was fully implemented in Japan, only 3 classes of World War I-era capital ships remained: the Issei-class battleships, the Kongo-class battle cruisers, and one of the Fuso-class battleships, Yamashiro. In 1924, the IJN declared in an edict on fleet organization that, quote, for the time being, the combined fleet would be a standing organization consisting of the IJN First Fleet and IJN Second Fleet. As this was not intended to be permanent, and since the commander of the IJN First Fleet concurrently directed the combined fleet was not given a headquarters staff of its own at this time. On September 18, 1931, Lieutenant Suemori Kawamoto of the Independent Garrison Unit of the 29th Japanese Infantry Regiment detonated a small quantity of dynamite close to a railway line owned by Japan's South Manchuria Railway near Mukden, now called Shenyang. The explosion was so weak that it failed to destroy the track, and a train passed over it just minutes later. The Imperial Japanese Army accused Chinese dissidents of the act and responded with a full invasion that led to the occupation of Manchuria, in which Japan established its puppet state of Manchukuo 5 months later. The deception was exposed in the Leighton Report of 1932, leading Japan to diplomatic isolation and its March 1933 withdrawal from the League of Nations. Now, why am I telling you this? Well, it affects the combined fleet, and here's why. From 1933, with the Mukden incident and the increasing tension with China, a permanent HQ staff for the combined fleet was established. By the late 1930s, it included most of Japan's warships. Only the base units, the Special Naval Landing Forces, and the China Area Fleet lay outside the combined fleet. The dominoes setting up World War II were already falling, and the combined fleet played a huge role in it. If you are enjoying this episode and want to hear more about ships, their careers, and their wrecks, check out our main show, Shipwreck Sunday, every Sunday night at 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Okay, let's look at the combined fleet in World War II. The combined fleet came under direct command of the Imperial General Headquarters in 1937. On September 1, 1939, Nazi Germany invaded Poland, kicking off World War II in Europe. Japan would launch the attack on the U.S. Navy at Pearl Harbor in Honolulu, Hawaii on December 7, 1941, and this would start the war in the Pacific. This was carried out by the combined fleet's Kido Butai, or 1st Striking Force or 1st Air Fleet. And the combined fleet became almost synonymous with the Imperial Japanese Navy at this point, now under the command of Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto until his death in April 1943 when his plane was shot down by U.S. Army Air Forces over Bougainville Island. At this point, the combined fleet comprised the battleships, aircraft carriers, aircraft, and the components that made up the main fighting strength of the IJN. It was first mobilized on the whole for the Battle of Midway. After the devastating loss of all 4 Japanese aircraft carriers at the Battle of Midway and in the Solomon Islands campaign, the Navy reorganized into a number of area fleets for local operational control of various geographic zones. The combined fleet then evolved into more of an administrative organization. As the war deteriorated for the Japanese and the territories held by the area fleets fell one after another to the United States Navy, the Imperial General Headquarters and the Imperial Japanese Navy General Staff acted to force the American fleet into a decisive battle in the Philippines per the decisive battleship doctrine or Kantai-Kessen philosophy. In the resultant Battle of the Philippine Sea and the Battle of Leyte Gulf, the Japanese fleet was severely reduced. The remnants of the combined fleet fled to Okinawa, but further operations were hindered by lack of fuel and air cover. By the time of the final suicide mission of the battleship Yamato in Operation Tengo, the combined fleet had ceased to exist as an effective combat force, with its final commander-in-chief having been Vice Admiral Jisaburo Ozawa. The United States would go on to drop 2 atomic bombs on Japan, and after this, Japan surrendered on September 2, 1945, ending World War II. As World War II was in the rearview mirror, the combined fleet became nothing but a distant memory. The aircraft carrier launched plane after plane at the Battle of the Philippine Sea, but repeatedly they fell from the sky as the American planes swooped in. Despite the disastrous battle, miraculously it looked like she might survive. Alas, like many other ships in the Imperial Japanese Navy, it was not meant to be. On this week's episode of Shipwreck Sunday, we get into the story of Shokaku.